What's going on, guys? I am here in Albuquerque, New Mexico, exploring the state. And aside from doing the touristy things like hot air balloon, which was very cool, floating in the sky. Tomorrow I'm gonna do white sands. But today I wanna go down memory lane in street photography and visit a spot that Garry Winogrand photographed. Probably one of his best images. It's the cover of his book, Figment of the Real World, of the little boy in the garage. But I'm not gonna do it myself. This is gonna be my first collab on my channel. Local resident, historian, photographer, writer, and genius everything relating to typewriters, Joe Van Cleve. He's a walking encyclopedia in regards to typewriting, but he is also very knowledgeable in the world of photography. Prior to my trip, I did research this photograph and this location, and I came across a couple of blogs, and the one that really stood out to me was Joe's. I'll have the link to his blog in the description box down below. Very detailed blog. I was very impressed, and I reached out to him, and so we're here. I'm gonna go pick him up right now, and he actually doesn't live too far away from that house that we're gonna go to, and let's go. What's going on, Joe?
Hey.
Hey, thanks for coming along.
Thank you, Tim. Thanks for coming by Albuquerque, and I know it was quite a trip coming out from Hawaii. You saw the balloons already?
Balloons yesterday, quite an experience, you know,
right?
Floating in the sky, and I'm afraid of heights, but it was very, just quite an experience, bucket list item.
So we're going to go down the street a couple miles here. Okay. This neighborhood that I live in is where I grew up at. It was built in the early 60s, but the photograph that we're talking about, that by Garry Winogrand, was titled New Mexico 1957. So 1957 is the year I was born, and the photograph to me looks like it was taken in the summer because of the clouds in the sky. We get a lot of these afternoon, called the monsoons. There's like moist air coming up from the Gulf of Mexico, or from the Gulf of California, from Baja. So it looks like the photo was taken in the summer of 57. Could have very well been taken on the born, I don't know, but around that time, right? Yeah. But when I first saw that photograph years ago, I looked at those mountains behind the house and I thought, I know those mountains. That's the Sandia Mountains, you know, the southern half of the Sandia Mountains. That little dip in the mountains up there, you can see that. See, that's right in the photograph. So around 2009, I saw that photo again and I decided I'd like to know where that house is. That's where I started this search.
Now, did you know about Garry Winogrand before that photo?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, I did. Yeah, I had been a photo enthusiast and kind of an amateur shutterbug for a long time, since the 80s maybe.
Okay.
And Garry Winogrand, I really liked his
And it must have been so cool that he has images of New Mexico.
At least that one image I know of. Now, I would really like to see the contact sheets. Like that whole roll of film he shot, because we only publicly know that one photo, but I would like to see what else he photographed, because he was a very prolific photographer. He photographed.
He shot and shot.
Oh, yeah. And when he died, he had maybe 100,000 rolls or frames, thousands of rolls of film undeveloped. So,
and his other image that I really like of New Mexico is, in my opinion, probably one of his best one, if not the best one, is White Sands.
Oh, yes.
I love that image.
One thing I really kind of find interesting about this particular photograph, it's a tract home on the edge of the city with the wilderness behind it. And it kind of reminds me of the new topographics style of photography. There was a whole movement in maybe the 1960s and onward called the new topographics that was kind of documenting how a human civilization was encroaching on the landscape. And a lot of these photos kind of incorporated both landscape and built up environments. And Winogrand was never really acknowledged as being part of the new topographics movement, but I really think this photograph, taken way back in 57, is kind of like the prototype of the new topographics.
Oh, that's interesting.
Right?
You mentioned that.
Yeah, because it has elements of it. There's the house, the garage part on the left, and then behind the house on the right, the desert scrub up to the foothills of the Sandias and all that. Yeah, it has that effect of, it literally was, though, on the edge of town. So when I was born, there was nothing out here but desert. Hardly.
Okay,
at least,
so it's just...
I was born a little north of where we're going to be going, but so that house would have been a new subdivision way out on the edge of town.
So still fairly new when you think about it.
Yeah, right. Well, Albuquerque is kind of like a typical Western city in that it really grew up after World War II. A lot of these Western towns with the grid streets, they were all built up. We're going to take a left and go east on Indian School Road, which is the next light. And this would have been the road that he would have come up on. It wouldn't have been I'm sure it was paved, but it was out in the edge of town.
And when we were talking on the phone a few weeks ago, you think he shot it through his car?
Well, it's possible, right? 1957, the interstate highway system had not been built out in New Mexico yet. So there was no Interstate 40, there was no I-25. So you had to get into Albuquerque via Route 66.
The famous Route 66,
yes,
yeah.
Yes. And he would have probably gotten off on Eubank Boulevard, which goes north-south. And so it's going to be the last street before you get to the light will be Muriel.
But if he did shoot it through his car, that's even more impressive.
Yeah, well,
I mean,
it's possible. Now, I think
yeah.
I brought a digital camera that we can simulate the focal lengths he might have been using with his Leica. And we'll try to see if we can find what position he was in and where he was standing, maybe. Okay, it's 12:08, which is going to be very close to...
12:08. Wow, the suspense.
I know. I think it's this one, maybe. 12:08.
17:28.
Oh, okay. Wait.
Now we gotta bust out the...
I'm pretty sure I said 12:08, but I'm...
It's okay, we can add a little drama.
Yeah, I have not been on to this house in years.
The last time you've been to it was with somebody else too, or just...
It was probably back the last
when
time I
wrote the blog,
when
then.
I wrote the
Ah.
yeah, I think that's probably... I might have
Maybe
came once since then, but I'd probably within like...
So maybe something's changed, I don't know. Did you meet when you went to visit, did you meet the homeowner?
I met the homeoner.
Yeah.
That she wasn't the original one, but she had...
Right.
She said that when the person that she bought it from told her that it was, or the real estate agent told her that it was featured in a famous photograph.
Right.
But she didn't know anything about that photograph. And I actually showed her the photograph. So
The real estate agent's probably trying to increase
oh
the
yeah,
value
that would be
with
the tactic. Oh, your house is
Yeah.
so famous. You know. Okay, so 12:08. Go ahead and turn here. 12:04. It's going to be 33. That's 32. Yeah, it's down near the end. Okay, I see. That's right. 28.
Oh, I'm getting chills driving down this street.
Yeah. 12:04. So it's
More.
actually the back
back
to
end.
12:04. So 12:08 is right here. So park right here. Maybe.
Oh, right here.
Yeah, this is it.
Okay, we're here, guys.
Yeah, this is it.
Wow.
Yeah.
I wonder if anybody lives here.
They probably do. In fact, this may be their truck.
1208 Muriel Street.
So I brought a couple little cheap prints, not photographic quality, but just
Thanks for that.
just
So we have that visual reference. Yeah, right here.
yeah.
Yeah,
Let's go ahead.
get out.
Well, here we are. I was last here about 15 years ago. The thing that's always interested me is where was he standing or sitting in his car maybe, and what focal length lens was he using. I have this lens like right now set to 28, and it looks like it's way too wide. Like I would have to get a lot closer. So he might have been using something more like a 50. And it's right out here in the middle of the street. It looks pretty close, but it actually looks closer if I crop in from there, almost like a 60. So I'm assuming he might have been shooting with a 50 mil lens and he might have cropped the negative a little bit. If that's the case, then he's purposely selected the left edge of the picture to have just a little bit of the windows. And he kind of purposely selected where the desert falls off in the distance. You notice the bottom of the picture is like the bottom of the driveway. So I'm kind of using that as a reference for where he would have cropped it at. And kind of the vertical angle of view, getting like the space above the roof of the house to the top of the frame. If I put the bottom of the frame along the edge of the sidewalk, it's about a little over 35 mil. So he might have used even a 35 and cropped in, but it looks like he cropped the picture horizontally quite a bit. Because it's not really a 3:2 aspect ratio, a little, not as much. But anyway, you can see though, part of the mountain behind the roof of the house there by the carport. And we can kind of get a sense from the shape of the line here of the mountain ridge. There's a little peak right there. That's kind of like right here. So that kind of tells me he was standing about right in front of the middle of the carport in order to see that little peak like right here. With about a 35 mil lens maybe, it looks like the vertical angle of view of the shot is about a 35 mil lens. And then he cropped it in a little bit on the sides. But what's interesting though is if you look at the original photograph, there's no house next to him. Yeah. So this was like one of the first houses built out here in 57.
Left to right.
Yeah. And so there is like a little bit of some kind of like a little pole or a piece of lumber and some little boxy looking thing here. That could have been from the construction of the house here, like left over.
Do you think he probably parked in front of the driveway and his window was
Yeah,
right
he
here.
could have, yeah. I think it's likely that, I mean, he could have got out and walked, and he certainly walked the streets of New York and other cities, but in Albuquerque, he's driving around these roads on the edge of Albuquerque. It would be like today if you went out to the edge of Rio Rancho, out on the west side, on the edge of the city out there. That's kind of what it's like out here back in '57. So I'm guessing he rolled the window down and he might have photographed her from the car. Also, because if you look at the angle of view, you see the angle in the carport, you have to kind of get down like this to get that same kind of angle under the carport. It's kind of a lower shot than standing. So I imagine he's in a car.
Yeah, because the driveway, it gives it that really up.
Right, but you see that angle underneath the carport. We're looking almost more edge on, but he's kind of underneath looking up at it, right? So you can see the 1208 numbers. They're no longer there on the post, but they were there because back in 2009, you could see the original metal letters, that you could see the marks of them underneath the paint.
I think that's why when you mentioned the angle now, maybe he was at the low angle or he was just pointing his camera lower in his car.
Well,
that's what makes it work.
Right.
Because it gives that kind of eerie.
Right. Now he's using a rangefinder camera. It was most likely an M3 because the M3s came out in 1954, something like that. So this is 57. If it's that low of an angle, he wouldn't have been able to really compose or focus through the camera lens. I'm guessing the car is pointing to the south here. He came onto this street from up there, and he's driving by. He stops here, rolls the window down, and maybe he took a couple pictures. I'm not really sure, but it looks to me like he did that from this angle, pointing south, probably from the seated position in the car. Yeah. There's another detail in the picture that I didn't really mention too much of in the blog article, which is this little hill with a U on it. That hill, of course, is still there, but the U is long gone. And the U was put there probably in the early 20th century by a fraternity at the University of New Mexico. They went up there, they moved a bunch of rocks around and painted them white and made this U for the university. Now there's another little personal memory I have is maybe, let's say 8 years after this picture was taken, something like the mid-1960s, my dad would drive us out on Wantabo Road, which is the 6-lane road up just behind the house. Behind their backyard is a shopping center and that big road. But back in the 60s, that was a dirt road. And it was just literally hills, like it was whoop-de-doos. And the thing was to drive it fast and kind of go up and down the dirt road. It went north-south. So you don't really see the road from the photograph, but there is kind of this sandy mound here. So somewhere along in the background, not too far away, was the road. And it was it's not that far away, it's just up the street. That's where that Wantabo Road originally was, hidden from view in the photograph, but it was there.
And then you were mentioning in the car, you think summer-ish because of the
clouds?
Yeah.
So it's clearly warm because the way the child is dressed. There's also another child in the shadow of the garage. It's warmish. The tricycle's overturned.
I like that small detail.
Oh, yeah, I do too.
Yeah.
So I think it was around July or August when we get the flow of moisture up from the Baja California. We call it the monsoons. It gets cloudy and sometimes there's rain. It kind of looks like that kind of a sky. You know, we're analyzing this photograph kind of like structurally, how it's built and how he shot it. But there's also kind of this way of looking at photography as an image, aside from the way it was made, right? And if you kind of analyze the photograph just as an image, you don't know anything about where it was taken, there's a lot of symbolism and a lot of things that are important. Like 1957 was the height of nuclear weapons. There was more megatonnage in H-bombs than any other time in history. That's when the number of megatons of H-bomb yield we had in the arsenal was maximum. And all of those weapons were engineered just a few miles south of here, like just off the right side of the paper and a little bit back this way at Sandia Base. That was where all the nuclear weapons in the country were engineered. And so there's this kind of sense of uncertainty and a sense of dystopia about the photograph, because you have this kind of cloudy sky and this scrub desert landscape, and the pose of the child has an uncertainty about it, and the overturned tricycle kind of maybe it represents, I mean, this is kind of the symbolism that an art of photography people would analyze, right? But the symbolism of the overturned tricycle is kind of like, technology is not as perfect. Like the utopia of technology that we had in the 50s after the war, after World War II, maybe it's not quite as utopia as we thought, right? It's a really remarkable photograph.
The mystery and unknown.
The mystery and the unknown, yeah. And as we were saying in the car, this might be the prototype for the new topographics. Like, Winogrand was never recognized as being part of the new topographic style of photography, but this photo certainly is. It's the city on the edge of the wilderness, on the edge of nothing, right? And it really captures it in a remarkable way. That he was never recognized for that, but I think it's really indicative of that. Also, being 1957, that was pretty early in his career photographically. He later on was known for taking these super prolific street photo shots in big cities like New York, where he just could barely move the camera to his eye and take a shot and you wouldn't even know it. But I'm not sure what his working methodology was back then, if he had that sense of timing or if he was working more at this slow, deliberate pace.
Especially his earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an interesting, it's like a time machine, coming out here and looking at this this house.
Yeah, I mean, when we were pulling up, I got chills. And this neighborhood, this house seems to be not upkept compared to other houses around.
No, yeah, that's right. It's a wonderful piece of history standing in front of this house. You know, imagining Garry Winogrand in whatever old car, 1950s car he was in. I was also going to point out another little detail. It looked like they had a little fence, kind of a...
Yep, I noticed that too. It's
between the carport and the wall, right? Maybe for shade or something. Hi. How are you doing?
Okay, yourself?
Oh, good. We're taking pictures out here on the street.
Oh, okay.
15 years ago, I came by and visited the owner of the house because this house had been in a famous photograph.
This house?
Yes. Yeah.
Have you seen it?
Have you seen the photograph?
This house?
Yeah. So this is your house.
Wow.
This was called Albuquerque 1957.
Oh, wow.
It was taken when there was nothing east of here.
Okay.
And the house next to you wasn't there.
Oh, wow.
And there used to be numbers on the brown pole there. You can still see in the paint up on top. But most of the houses, like, you can see the window. It's the same kind of window without the bars, but same kind of window. And everything is pretty much the same except for the landscape behind it has changed, you know, the city. But yeah, this was a famous photographer. His name was Garry Winogrand.
Oh.
He was one of the most famous street photographers, and he was exploring the American West back in the late 50s, and he somehow drove himself out to what was the edge of Albuquerque. Because remember, in '57 there was no interstate highway. He would have driven on Route 66, where Central is. There was no Wantabo.
No.
He would have come up on Eubank, and probably come up maybe Constitution or Mountain Road, probably Mountain Road, I guess, now that I know where we're at exactly. He would have come up Mountain Road and found this edge of town house. It was the middle of nowhere. And it would be like today if you went out to the edge of Rio Rancho. You know what I mean?
Okay.
And that was kind of what this was like back in 1957. I was born probably around the time this picture was taken. I was born in August, well, and the original tree, this little bush, that tree, the trunk of it is like here underneath the gravel. It matured and died, and they cut it down. You know, so they have their own life cycle, these trees, right? And anyways.
Yeah, big dinosaurs.
Yes. Anyway, I don't mean to bother you. We were
It's
just,
okay.
I
thought you were doing some kind of something.
yeah, we're up to no good and all that.
Yeah, if anybody was living here or home.
Yeah.
So glad you came out.
So yeah.
Okay,
I'm here
cool.
during the day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sorry to bother you. Well, that's why I kind of thought it was interesting documenting this in my blog article. Back when blogs were actually read.
At the height.
At the height,
blogs,
right? But it was like, yeah, people kind of figure out there's a famous photograph, and the houses that are in it have their own history, and maybe people don't know it.
Pretty much everything is intact.
It's the same windows. They've never upgraded the windows.
Here. Yep. Just the barrier.
Yeah. It didn't have the wrought iron security bars, but it was the same single pane, you know, casement windows.
All right, there you guys have it. Thank you, Joe, so much for the education, the tour. I hope you guys enjoyed it. This address, again, 1208 Muriel Street.
Yes.
And I'll have Joe's blog from 15 years ago, which is still going popular right now, in the description box down below. If you're ever in New Mexico, you're a street photography fan or a photography fan, definitely come check out this spot.
It is a landmark in the history of like photography in the western US in the late 50s and 60s. This is one of the classic locations, I think. And I think if time permits, we're going to go have lunch. I think we should do that.
I love food. And by the way, have you ever thought of auditioning for like A&E or History Channel? You have the right radio voice.
Oh, thank you, thank you. That means I don't know how to tell the truth? No.
But check out Joe's YouTube channel, Typewriters Historian. Until next time, please subscribe to Joe's channel, subscribe to my channel. If you guys enjoyed this, want to see more videos like this, let me know. But until next time,
stay creative and have yourselves a great day. That's how I finish them.
Awesome.